Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Me and the group just talked about the Knicks taking that 2-0 series lead over the Indiana Pacers, but now we are going to be switching gears here a little bit into the NHL, where we have a couple hockey masterminds here in Jeremy and Garrison. Sam, not to discredit you by any means either, but, don't do a ton of hockey here, so I wanted to sort of do a little bit of an overview of last night's games as well as the playoff picture as a whole. And we sort of started to talk about the Bruins dropping that game to the Panthers last night. So I wanted to start there because I do think that this was a pretty rough game for the Bruins, of course, losing 6-1. They actually, in my opinion, looked like they were outplaying the Panthers in that first period. They came out of it with a 1-0 lead. They had some other scoring chances as well, but weren't able to capitalize. And then really from there, it was all Panthers. But we can definitely see the tensions running very high with these two teams. There was the all-out brawl that took place in that third period. There ended up being 136 penalty minutes that were given out in the third period alone. Two teams that definitely don't like each other faced off against one another in the postseason last year. So, Jeremy, I want to start with you. Do you think that the Bruins can still go back to Boston with some confidence, given that they stole game one, or does this seem like a turning point in the series to you?
Yeah, so you can look at it in a couple ways, and this definitely has a kind of turning point feel. When you give up 6 unanswered goals, that's never a good look. But the one silver lining for Boston, and this is something that really no other team in the playoffs has the luxury of, is their goaltending situation. And when you talk about hockey, especially playoff hockey, nothing matters more than a hot goaltender. Jeremy Swayman, who is one of the two tandem goalies in Boston, was having an incredible playoff run. He started 6 of the games against the Leaves, and his Game 7 performance is like the reason that they're here in the second round. But behind him, they have Linus Ullmark, who is nothing to scoff at anyway. You give up 6 unanswered goals, you can look at a couple other things, but the Bruins have the luxury of switching goaltenders and still having an elite option there. So going back home, Game 3, I'd expect them to make the switch. They've been pretty adamant about doing that. These two have been switching all the time. You don't see true tandems all the time in hockey, but when you're starting to see this happen, it's not going to lose confidence in the other goaltender, and they have the luxury of being able to do that. So if they can pull out a good performance in Game 3, I don't think it's over yet. That it can be a big change in momentum, though. Giving up 6 unanswered goals is not a good look.
Yeah, they ended up pulling Swayman from the game last night. Now, I don't believe it was fully because his play was so bad, but they seemed like they needed just some sort of other look out there. Swayman obviously not his sharpest last night, but Sam, I want to ask you here because when Ullmark did come in to play for the Bruins, he did allow a goal. Now, again, this was a little bit garbage time. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was the power play goal that the Bruins allowed. They had been phenomenal on the penalty kill for a lot of the postseason so far. But Sam, when you see Ullmark let up that goal in the third period last night, and like Jeremy was talking about with this tandem idea, do you overreact to the fact that he let up the goal last night, or do you feel like give him a clean slate and a fresh ice in Game 3 to potentially steal that one back?
I don't know, maybe it's a hot take or not, but I don't overreact really. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I understand, and I think a lot of people do that, giving up the goal late. But I think again, give him a clean slate, give him, some time to rest up and just get a new, just get a new game going. I think last night was kind of just throw it away for the Bruins. I mean, it was a pretty horrible loss. Just, oop, there we go. Sorry about that. That happens sometimes during my show. Can't really control it. But yeah. So for the Bruins, I think that getting their goalie tandem really healthy and just kind of focused, I think is their biggest thing. And I really think that it has been the focus of their teams for a few years now. So I'm not overreacting that much. I think give him a clean slate and he'll be okay. And that's really what I'm watching going forward in the series.
To the question that we answered in the last segment about which of the 4 teams from Boston and New York could break up this conference finals showdown that would really just be an all-time sort of sports rivalry moment there. I know that maybe it's not the, rivalries we're necessarily used to seeing in the postseason in the past decade or so, but I feel like it would still be able to generate that charge anyways, just because of the locations of it and everything. But looking on that other side of the Eastern Conference bracket, we do have the New York Rangers, the President's Trophy winner of the regular season. We know sort of the drama that goes behind that type of an accomplishment. As a Bruins fan myself, I know it all too well after the regular season the Bruins had last year and their eventual fallout. But Garrison, what are your thoughts on the Rangers' possibility of being the first team since the Chicago Blackhawks in 2012-13 to break the curse of the President's Trophy and go on to win the Stanley Cup Finals?
Yeah, I think that they clearly have the best opportunity to do so. This team is amazing. Their top 9, I would say that third line can play as a lot of teams' first lines. It surely would be of any of the bottom 6 teams in the NHL's first line. You get Alexis Lafreniere, Wenberg, and I'm blanking on their right wing, but it's a really, really good just top 9 forwards. And then you're also getting production out of Adam Fox, who played very well in that game too. The Rangers look really good, and I'd be very scared to play them. The Hurricanes, for me, I think, are the team that match up the best against them. The Hurricanes are a very kind of young core, and they, in that first round, got a lot of production out of Seth Jarvis, who's 21 years old, a very young forward. He's amazing. And Sebastian Aho, even more, is amazing. And the Hurricanes still couldn't win that game too, even though Sebastian Aho, I think, played the best game of hockey I've ever seen Sebastian Aho play. So to kind of waste that performance, that kind of spells a little bit of death for the Carolina Hurricanes. And I don't know a team that's beating this New York Rangers team. I don't think anybody on the West has a chance at it either.
Jeremy, do you think going back to Carolina, the Hurricanes can find some way to generate some momentum, or is this the Rangers series here?
Definitely. I mean, when I'm watching these games, about 5 out of the, I guess they went to double overtime that one time. So 7 out of the 8 periods that they've played in these first 2 games, I think the Hurricanes have looked like the better team. They're getting more shots on net, they're getting better quality chances, and they're getting more puck possession in the zone. The issue is they're going up against Igor Shesterkin, who is having himself a series. And like I was saying in the Boston series, it doesn't matter how good you are. If your goaltender that you're going up against decides to become a brick wall, you're not gonna win that game. And that's what happened in game 2. I think the Hurricanes were flat out the better team in that game for the entire game. Overtime, double overtime especially, they were getting great chances. So I don't think by any means this is saying they don't have a shot. Going back to Carolina, that's a rocking home stadium if you watched their playoff atmosphere before. So it should be a lot of fun heading back there.
So I know that I don't have much time left with you guys, so I want to quickly look over to the Western Conference. I know that, Garrison, you said you don't know if there necessarily is that same level of contender that could at least knock off the Rangers, who are the odds-on favorites, currently tied with the Colorado Avalanche, according to DraftKings, for Stanley Cup odds. But before we talk about that series, I want to go into the late game from last night, where we saw the Canucks beat the Oilers in a 5-4 matchup. This is something that sort of came at least as a surprise to me. The Canucks had a very solid regular season, but I don't know if they were necessarily perceived as this playoff-ready core. And the current, like I said, we knew that we were running out of time there, but that is all. Unfortunate that I couldn't necessarily say the proper goodbye. Thank you very much to the guys for joining us here on the GSMC Sports Podcast today. I'm going to be helping to join some of their shows as well, so definitely keep an eye out for those appearances as well. Doing a lot more collaborative stuff here at the GSMC Sports Network. But sort of finishing off the hockey thoughts here, as I was sort of alluding to, the Canucks are the last ranked team in terms of Stanley Cup odds as things currently stand in the NHL. They are plus 1,300, and that's even after taking the game last night. So it is an interesting conversation there. The Oilers obviously have that top-end talent, but the Canucks' production during the regular season definitely cannot go overlooked, and this was a stunner. I don't know if necessarily it's going to be enough to be able to, fully carry them over the massive, I don't know if I'm ready to call it a massive talent discrepancy, but the Oilers are the better team, at least in my eyes, and coming out last night and having the performance that they did to steal that game feels pretty substantial in my eyes. Now, they're defending home ice right now. I believe that is the biggest thing for them in order to sort of keep this series in control, because obviously Oilers are not really to be played around with, so going to be interesting there. And then I guess sort of final thoughts here before we move on. I didn't get to catch the full Stars and Avalanche game, but I got to watch the third period on, and I thought that was such an impressive win for the Avalanche to come back down 3-0, and it seemed like, at that point they could have been in for it, but the veteran experience and the playoff experience of those Av players really did come into play there. And then we saw in overtime, after definitely struggling earlier on in that game, Alexander Georgiev ends up standing on his head in that overtime period. He was getting peppered with shots early on, and they were able to just hold them off long enough to the point where they ended up getting the fast break opportunity. The breakaway speed from Miles Wood ends up winning that game for them. So I do think that the Avalanche are definitely not to be overlooked in this sort of playoff picture as well. Like I mentioned, it's not necessarily any kind of a hot take. They are tied with the Rangers for the best odds to win the Stanley Cup playoffs. But let us know what you think about the NHL playoffs in the comments section. I know we don't do a ton of hockey on this show, but as the playoffs continue to heat up, I'm going to try and throw some more action into the conversation here. But for now, we are going to be taking our second break of the show, and when we come back on the other side, I want to dive into the NBA awards that have been handed out during the past few days. So thank you again to Jeremy, Sam, Garrison for joining the show. You can catch all of them. We got Sam coming on right after my show, Jeremy following him, and then Garrison later tonight. So definitely check out their channels as well. They do incredible work, and like I mentioned, we will continue to be doing work with them. But on that note, taking our second break here, and when we come back on the other side, we will dive back into some NBA awards. So stick with us. We will be right back.